understanding how compression, limiting, and gating works, and understanding that from the concept of what does a recording of a kick drum actually look like, and how do these things affect that. We're trying to make something sound in general loud, punchy, but not distort. And how do we do that in a digital environment with someone listening to it on an iPhone? So when you think about someone smacking a snare drum, what's actually happening is there's this immediate boost in sound that's called the transient. That's our attack. It's a very immediate attack. It then kind of drops down and sustains out for a little bit. That's what our ear mostly hears, is that resulting tone right after the smack. And then it fades out. So attack, decay, sustain, which is what we hear, and then the release. Okay. When we're trying to make that sound full on our recordings, you have to think about how the human ear and how analog gear handled that initial transient, that big spike in audio that our ear kind of naturally compresses. It doesn't really bother us necessarily that much unless you're right there on it. But when you're mixing in a digital medium, which most of us are these days, that transient is more preserved than it was in the real world with your ears or old school with analog equipment. And so it's eating up all of our headroom, and so I've been thinking about ways to control that in a way that sounds natural and then gives us more room in our mix to boost things up so that they can become apparent. So my go-to trick lately has been, if I have a DBX 160 available, I've been loving that for individual drums, but I've also been pushing my entire drum bus through that, doing parallel compression. So I've been just doing real basic, starting at 50%, dropping the threshold back to where it's compressing about 6 dB, about 10 dB, and then boosting the output 6 dB. So when you put all that together, you end up with a really punchy drum, but you're still accenting that transient. And that's really our big problem here. So I've then been putting a limiter on and just getting it down to where you're seeing on the meter that it's reducing 3 dB, maybe as much as 6 dB. Once you get around 6 or higher is where you'll actually start hearing it in a bad way. But I find that I can start pulling this limiter down, chopping off that transient in a natural way, like what the human ear does. And I can't hear the difference at all when I'm doing it, but I can see that my peak is way lower than it used to be. And by having the peak lower, that means I've got more room to boost the entire drum or other things around the drum in the mix. And I'm able to get a little bit more volume to squeeze out of a small speaker like an iPhone or even a big speaker, because I'm not eating up all that headroom with the transient. So again, one of those things where you're doing it and then you're turning it on and off. Is it actually negatively affecting my sound when it's on? If so, then don't do it. But if not, well, then why not? You just created more headroom for yourself, and now you have room to do other mixing tricks. So that's been something I've been playing around with a lot lately, and in all the broadcast scenarios I've done at churches since the pandemic, that has done a surprisingly good job at making the drums come through and sound strong in even an iPhone.
Mixing sound seems complicated, but it doesn't have to be. Get access to our stress-free training to help you create great sound at church by visiting churchsoundmadesimple.com.